What is population? Population is a group of individuals of a particular species in a particular habitat at a particular time. When we say at a particular habitat and time, there must be a place or area where a group of individuals of the same species live on, and there must be time boundary when this group of individuals live on that habitat. Populations are dynamic like ecosystem. That means they are constantly changing due to biotic and abiotic environmental factors. Before we are going to study populations, first we need to describe habitat, geographical range, and ecological niche. Habitat means part of an ecosystem where members of a particular population live on to find the nutrients, water, living space, and other essential resources to survive. Whereas geographical range means part of the Earth's surface or ecosphere where members of a particular species live on. And ecological niche means an organism's role or demand within a habitat. How can several populations live in the same area or habitat? As many research shows that two species cannot normally occupy the same niche. If two species are present initially, they will compete for the same available resources in that habitat. One will be more successful and the other will be made locally extinct, what we call competitive exclusion principle. For example, in pond there are populations of many different organisms. They are able to live in the same area because each exploits different habitat in that area. For example, plankton exploit the open water region of the pond. Decomposers inhabit the detritus found at the bottom of the pond, and snails browse the surface of the sediment at the bottom of the pond and graze small organisms. That means to live in this the same habitat, pond, these three groups of organisms or these three groups of populations make different ecological niche. That means even though they take different parts of the pond, they have developed different demands. For example, planktons demand water, carbon dioxide, light energy, and other nutrients for photosynthesis. Decomposers demand detritus, and snails demand in this pond small organisms. Another example, if both floating plants and tadpoles are found in the open water habitat, they make different ecological niches. That means plants use or demand sunlight, carbon dioxide, water, and minerals from the water, whereas tadpoles demand larvae of insects. Since these two groups of population have different ecological niches, they can survive or share the same habitat, that is open water. Another example, both blue tits and gray tits, types of birds, forage on trees for insects and insect larvae. When one species is present, it forages at the same height. If both species are present in the same trees, they forage at different heights and to avoid competing for the same niche. What are the main factors that influence the density or sizes of populations? As we have said, a population is all the individuals of a certain species in a certain habitat at a certain time. Anything which influences these members clearly affects the sizes of population. There are three factors that directly affect numbers or densities of population. These are natality, mortality, and migration. Natality or birth rate means the rate at which members of a population is born, whereas mortality or death rate means the rate at which members of a population die. And migration means the movement into immigration and out of immigration, the area or habitat. Natality and mortality are clearly linked in their influences. That is, if natality exceeds mortality, the population size will increase. If mortality exceeds natality, the population size will decrease. And if mortality and natality are equal, the population size will remain the same or constant. Like natality and mortality, immigration and migration are linked in their influences. If immigration exceeds immigration, the population size will increase. If immigration exceeds immigration, the population size will decrease. And if immigration and immigration are equal, the population size remain the same. As you can see from the diagram, natality or birth rate and immigration always add certain members to the population. In contrast, mortality rate or death rate and immigration always decrease or reduce certain members from population density. Factors influence mortality and natality. These factors influence how quickly a population increases or decreases in size. These factors can be divided into two main categories, abiotic factors and biotic factors. Let us see abiotic factors. Abiotic factors are simply the effects of factors in the physical environment. These abiotic factors include light intensity, temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide concentration, oxygen concentration, physical space, storms, floods, earthquake, landslides, and so on. The second factors influence mortality and natality that can determine how quickly a population increases or decreases in size is biotic factor. Biotic factors are the effects of organisms on themselves, either belonging to the same species or different species. Some of the main biotic factors are predation, disease, and competition. Predation is biological interaction where one organism, the predator, kills and eats another organism, its prey. In a typical predator-prey relationship, when the population of prey begins to fall due to being eaten by predators, there is intra or interspecific competition between the predators for the remaining prey, leading to predator population decline. This allows the numbers of prey to recover. For example, cats versus rats. The second types of biotic factors is disease, particularly infectious disease. This is the interaction of pathogenic microorganisms with host organisms. In this case, germs reduce productivity or fertility and hence kills the host organisms. This results in reduction of host population densities. If the disease is widespread, then mortality of host will be increased and population growth will be slowed down. The third forms of biotic factors is competition. Competition means the use of the same resources by individuals of the same species or different species when the supply of the resource is insufficient for the combined needs of all individuals. This competition can be intraspecific competition and interspecific competition. When we see intraspecific competition is competition between members of the same species for the same resources in the same habitat. Intraspecific competition operates in two main ways. The first way is reducing the resources to all of the population can reduce their fertility and so reduce population growth. The second way is reducing the resources to just one of the population means that they die whilst the others reproduce, but population growth is still reduced. For intraspecific competition, we can take two best examples. The first example is gypsy moth caterpillars infested much of the southern New England on the western coast of the United States in the summers of 1980. However, the density of this initial infestation was quite low, allowing most of the caterpillars to metamorphose into adults. The adults mated and laid masses of eggs on nearly every tree in the region. In the following spring, all the eggs hatched and the caterpillars began feeding. As they fed and grew, they stripped all the trees of their leaves. The millions of caterpillars were soon competing for the very limited resources any remaining leaves. As a result, their population crashed and very few caterpillars were able to metamorphose into adults. The second example, with increased numbers planted, there is increased intraspecific competition between germinating seedlings for limited resources. This results in fewer smaller plants surviving. This has application in agriculture with packets of seeds of crop plants being supplied with recommended sowing densities to give maximum yields. There can be intraspecific competition between plants. In one experiment, different numbers of sunflower seeds were planted in the same sized pots. The numbers of live plants per pot and the mean plant height are shown in table 2.6a and 2.6b. As we can see from the experimental results in table 2.6, the seeds sow on 5 pots. In these 5 pots, nutrients or soil quality, water, and light intensity are the same. Only number of seeds are different. In pot 1, number of seeds is 2. In pot 2, number of seeds is 4. In pot 3, number of seeds is 8. In pot 4, 16. And in pot 5, 32. Then, this number of seeds treated equally in the same condition. As we can see from the results, after 35 days, 2, 3, 3, 7 and 17 seedlings germinate from the number of seeds that are sown 2, 4, 8, 16 and 32 on pot 1, pot 2, pot 3, pot 4 and pot 5 respectively, which means most of the seeds die off due to competition for nutrients. When we see the height of seedlings of pot 1 and pot 5 in table 2.6b, there is a significant difference. Heights of seedlings in pot 1 is 27.4, but in contrast, heights of seedlings in pot 5 is 15.2. This indicates that this similar amount of nutrients and water in pot 1 is shared to 2 seedlings, but in pot 5 it is shared to 17 individuals. Therefore, 17 individuals in pot 5 got very small share. This is the reason why individuals in pot 5 is shorter than individuals in pot 2. This is as if one bread is shared by 2 persons and the same bread is shared by 17%. Generally, when the number of seedlings increase for the same resources, intraspecific competition for these limited resources increase and results in death or reduction of population densities. The second forms of competition is interspecific competition. This interspecific competition is competition between members of different species for the same resources in the same habitat. The following can happen in appropriate circumstances. The first event is in interspecific competition can be one of the two species outcompete the others. The others can be die out. The second event is both species suffer reduction as they are nearly equal in their ability to harvest the resources. In this case, intraspecific competition for reduced resources also come into play. The third event is in interspecific competition is the species are able to coexist. This can happen when they are equal in their ability and the resources are plentiful. For example, there are two species of barnacles, a kind of crustaceans. These are Chitalamus stellatus and Bellanus bellanoides. Chitalamus stellatus live in all intertidal zone between the highest tides and the lowest tides. That means in the upper, middle, and lower intertidal zone. But Bellanus bellanoides cannot live in the upper intertidal zone
and lower intertidal zone due to desiccation and predation, respectively. Spillanoids can only live in the middle intertidal zone. When both these two species occur in the middle intertidal zone, spillanoids outcompete Chitalamas stellatus for the available resources, particularly space. But in the absence of spillanoids, Chitalamas stellatus can live in all intertidal zones. The second example is interspecific competition between Ethiopian wolves and domestic dogs for rats in some areas of Ethiopia. The third best experimental example is interspecific competition between two species of paramecium that have the same ecological niches or demands. In 1934, Jeff Gauss grew two different species of paramecium, that is, Paramecium aurelia and Paramecium caudatum, in a culture medium of oatmeal and yeast. Initially, he grew each species in isolation and monitored the population densities. Then he grew the species together and again monitored the population densities. As you can see from the graphs in figure, Gauss concluded that if the two species utilize the same resources in the same habitat, Paramecium aurelia totally outcompete Paramecium caudatum for the same available resources. In this case, Paramecium caudatum locally extinct. Let us summarize the ways how biotic factors can affect population growth, how predation affects population size. The presence of a predator or herbivore in the case of plants will effectively increase mortality and reduce the numbers in a population. How disease or disease-causing organisms affects population density. If disease is widespread, then mortality will be increased and population growth will be slowed down. How intraspecific competition affects population size. Competition between members of the same species can operate in two main ways. The first way, reducing the resources to all of the population can reduce their fertility and so reduce population growth. The second way, reducing the resources to just some of the population as others compete more effectively means that they die whilst the others reproduce, but the population growth is still reduced. How interspecific competition affects population density. Although the competitive exclusion principle stated that two species cannot occupy the same niche, this is not absolute. The following can happen in appropriate circumstances. The first event, one of the two species outcompetes the other, which may die out. The second event, both species suffer reduction as they are nearly equal in their ability to harvest the resource, and the effects of intraspecific competition for a reduced resources also come into play. Or the species are able to coexist when their ability is equal and the available resources are plentiful or excess.
How do populations grow in an environment? All populations show the same pattern of growth. After an initial establishing phase, they show exponential growth until the carrying capacity of the environment gets happen. Carrying capacity means the number that the environment is capable of supporting or carrying at a particular time or at that time. Population growth follow either exponential or arithmetic forms of growth. Arithmetic forms of population growth means the process in which the population density increased by the same fixed amount in each time period. This produces a uniform rate of growth over the time period. To determine population density after n's period, an is equal to initial population A1 plus n's period n minus 1 times d, the common difference. As we can see from the table, the population increases by a fixed amount or number, which is 5, what we call the common difference between population density after n's periods. That is 50 minus 45, which is 5, 45 minus 40, which is 5. 40 minus 35, which is 5. 35 minus 30, which is equal to 5. 30 minus 25 is equal to 5. 25 minus 20 is equal to 5. 20 minus 15 is equal to 5. 15 minus 10, which is equal to 5. The second form of population growth is exponential growth. Exponential growth is the process in which the population density doubles in a time period that produces an ever increasing growth rate that cannot be sustained by environment or nature. To determine the densities of population that follow exponential forms of growth after nth period, we can use the formula Gn, or population density after nth period, is equal to G1, or initial population density, times R, the common difference, the power of nth period minus 1. As we can see exponential forms of population growth in the table, the initial population density is 10, and after nth period later, the population doubles and equal to 20. In the second period, this 20 gets doubled and 40. When 40 gets doubled, 80, 80 doubled and produce a population that has 160 members. This population again after nth period or fifth period gets doubled and rises to 320 members. When this 320 gets doubled, it gives us 640. When this 640 gets doubled, it gives us, or it produces, 1280. And when this 1280 members of a population gets doubled, it gives us 2560 members of a population. As we can see from the table, the population density gets double and double after initial establishing phase. So, n's period might be minutes, hours, days, months, years, or decades, depending on the types of population. The main phases in a population growth curve, as a result of the combined influences of some or all of the biotic and abiotic factors described above. Most populations develop through four main stages or phases. The first phase is lag phase. In lag phase, the population establishes itself or starts to live on an area for the first time. Then they need to be adapted to the environment before they reproduce. In this case, individual members of the population struggle to be adapted and then adapted and reproduce. Individuals who cannot be adapted to the environment, these individuals die out from that environment. Due to this reason, the numbers remain low and static or increase slowly. In log phase, all the members that are adapted to the environment during lag phase reproduce rapidly by using all their capacity due to plentiful resources in the environment, what they see, and are adapted. In this case, the numbers of individuals or population density increase rapidly or exponentially. In stationary phase, the carrying capacity of the environment is reached. That means rate of population growth is limited by resource depletion or exhaustion and accumulation of certain toxic chemicals due to overpopulated members. In this case, birth rate and death rate is equal, which means population growth rate becomes constant. We know that population growth rate is equal to birth rate minus death rate. When birth rate and death rate is equal, birth rate minus death rate is 0, which means no net population grows. This results in the numbers remain fairly constant, which means they fluctuate about a mean level. In decline phase, more nutrients are exhausted and a new disease strikes or more toxic excretory products accumulated. This high exhaustion of nutrients and high accumulation of toxic excretory products significantly facilitate extremely high death rates. That means numbers decline rapidly. This population growth curve shows an idealized curve. Not many population actually grow exactly in this manner. This graph shows the actual population growth curve. The phases must fluctuate quite widely from the above idealized curve because carrying capacity of the environment always changes from time to time due to continuous changes or fluctuation of abiotic and biotic factors like sunshine, rainfall, predation, disease, and so on. Human population grows. Human population has been increasing particularly quickly over the past 200 years. This is due to qualitative and quantitative food production and distribution globally, public health improvements, advancement of medical care, medical technology improvements, educational advancement, improved sanitation, and increased standards of living. The highest population growth rate is one factor in preventing or slowing down country or global development. The sheer weight of numbers makes it difficult to implement educational programs, health programs, proper sanitation, and all similar measures. As most scientists estimated, carrying capacity of the Earth for humans is at around 10 to 12 billion. Due to this reason, human population is subject to the same checks as other populations. Various biotic and abiotic factors still influence population size. However, the human population is subject to other factors affecting its development. These factors agricultural development and industrialization. This affects human population growth rates, death rates, and life expectancy. These changes are called demographic transition. Demographic transition is a model that seeks to explain transformation of countries from having high birth rate and death rates to low birth rate and death rates. Due to the existence of different demographic transition in developed and developing countries, the population growth in developing countries doubles in every 33 years and population growth in developed countries double in every 120 years. Here is the graph that shows different stages of demographic transition. The first stage is pre-industrial stage. In pre-industrial stage, birth rate and death rate is high. Natural increase or growth rate is stable or slowly increase. This is because birth rate and death rate is the same. The reason that birth rate is high, many children are needed for farming, many children die at early age, and religious or social activities encourage childbirth and no family planning. Reasons for changes in death rate is disease, famine, poor medical knowledge. In this case, so many children die out. At mechanization of agriculture or urbanization, birth rate is high, death rate falls rapidly. In this case, natural increase or growth rate is very rapid. Natural increase very rapidly because birth rate is significantly higher than death rate. We know that natural increase or growth rate is equal to birth rate minus death rate. Reasons for changes in birth rate is many children are needed for farming and many children die at early age. No family planning. In mature industrial age, birth rate is falling. Death rate falls more slowly. In this case, natural increase slows down. The reason for falling of birth rate is improved medical care and diet, and fewer children are needed. The reason for falls of Days rate is improvements in medical care, water supply, and sanitation. When we see the first stages of post-industrial age, birth rate low, days rate low, and natural increase becomes stable or increase slowly. Low birth rate is due to family planning, good health improving status of women, and later marriage. The reason for low death rate is good health care and reliable food supply. In the last stages of post-industrial age, birth rate is very low, death rate low, natural increase slow or natural decrease. The reason for very low birth rate is family planning, good health improvement status of women, and later marriages. The reason for decreasement of death rate is good health care and reliable food supply. In this stage, natural decrease can happen because birth rate is lower than death rate. Notice that in the second and third stages of demographic transition, death rates fall before birth rates. This creates a period when the population is increasing. In the final stages, birth rates and death rates are low and the population is stable with either slow increase or slow decrease. Most developed countries are in one of these two final stages of demographic transition, whereas developing countries are still in the one of the two middle stages. As a result, most of the population growth is occurring in developing countries.
In the demographic transition, the relative number of young and old people changes. A population at any given time is composed of individuals of different age groups. These are best shown in age pyramids. Age pyramid is a graph that shows age distribution of males and females within a population. For human population, the age pyramid generally shows in a combined diagram. The shape of age pyramids reflects the growth status of population or demographic transition of population from having high birth rate and death rate to low birth rate and death rate, whether it is growing, stable, or declining. The broad base to the population in Kenya shows that large numbers of children are still being born and that the population is increasing. The structure in USA and Italy is different. There are similar numbers in all the age pyramids, the age groups until about age 60. This suggests that the numbers being born are slightly greater than those dying, and the population numbers are increasing slowly. Notice also that life expectancy is greater in Italy and USA. This is true of most developed countries.
Human population growth control. Whether the global human population increases or decreases depends on the balance between global natality and global mortality. We can reduce global population growth by using two techniques. The first one, increasing mortality rate, and the second one, decreasing natality rate. In the first case, increasing mortality. This is the do nothing option, and we can wait until the population crashes or war is rift from competition for resources. This can happen when population growth are so far over our carrying capacity, the carrying capacity of the country or the world. The best method to decrease population growth is decreasing natality rate. This is the only option we really have and we can control. We must control numbers of children being born if we are to stop the runaway growth of the human population. All of the following methods will reduce rapid population growth rate. These are sex education, access to contraception methods, general education to enable students to consider other options in their future. In addition, the following will improve general health
which is usually associated with lower reproduction rates. This includes education about diet, resources to improve the quality and quantity of crops grown, and stock reared in rural communities.